We recognize that CVUUS gathers on land seized from the Western Abenaki people by European colonizers. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual relationship to the land and waters of the Champlain Valley. We are committed to building a peaceful and more just relationship with them and to promoting knowledge about their history and culture. Good morning. And welcome to the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society, CVUUS. My name is Martha Fulda, a member of this congregation and your worship associate today. Most of you probably don't know that we worship associates meet once a month for planning with the rest of the worship team. And a couple of months ago, I was away for a meeting. And I missed a worship team and told Abby Sessions to, yes, schedule me to be worship associate whenever they needed me. And that's how I came to be here today, surprise, on my birthday. So, I have the hugest birthday party ever. This morning's service is conducted by our minister, Barnaby, whom I join on the chancel this morning. Headsets to amplify sound, like these, are available in the back of the sanctuary. Just ask. And it's Blue Jeans Sunday. And I'm ready. So plan to stay after services to help beautify our building and grounds and join us afterwards for pizza. Whoever you are, whatever your story, wherever the source of your faith, you are welcome here. We at the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society invite you to settle in, whether it's your first time here or you've been away for a while and are back, welcome. And welcome to all of you out in Zoom land. Hello, if you're new here, we invite you to sign our guest book in the lobby. There you can introduce yourself and sign up to receive our monthly newsletter. We invite you to stay for our social hour downstairs following worship so we can begin to get to know you and you can begin to get to know us. We have a custom of using these yellow cards to share our personal milestones and passages with the congregation. If you're experiencing such an important event in your life right now, we invite you to pick up a yellow card from the small table just outside the doors, fill it out, and we'll collect them in the offering baskets. As always, our service this morning is the result of many volunteers. Ellen Flight at the camera, Liam Batches-Greenwood and Mary Hadley on sound and tech, Chris Murphy for the lovely flowers, and Mike Greenwood and Brett Millier for ushering. We strive to be a welcoming and active presence in our community, working together to build a world which is more beautiful, just, and compassionate. There are many ways we connect with one another in fulfilling that mission. Several are mentioned in your order of service. Please read them. And also in the weekly email blast set out from our office by our office manager, Laura Asurmali. If you would like to be added to her email list, just call the church office. Now, we please welcome Catherine Schloff. Yay, good.
is Catherine Schloff, and I'm a member. Okay. And I'm a member of the Caring Network, and I'm here to introduce you to a survey we've recently created. The Caring Network has been a part of life at CVUUS pretty much from the get-go. For most of the time, there has been a committee keeping tabs and acting upon what needs we can do for our members and friends. Lately, we've been wondering if we're missing aspects or ways we can fulfill needs we've not been aware of or thought of. We're hoping in the month of May, you can take 5 to 10 minutes to read and fill it out. We're especially interested in your ideas in the comments and suggestions areas on the survey. We'll be passing them out after service today. Also, Ginny Aschenfelter will be downstairs with surveys and pens. As well, the survey can easily be accessed online at cvuus.org, and this we know is especially easy for families and others who cannot attend in person. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Catherine is a little modest in saying she's a member of the Caring Network. She's the leader of the Caring Network. And special thanks to Lynn Ballman for all her work designing this survey. In addition to telling us about what needs might be out there, it's going to help us create a profile for any interim minister and minister to come about what's going on in the congregation. So please help by just taking a few minutes to fill it out. So this service is a little different from any other. It's an experiment cramming 3 classes that are normally done outside of worship for people who are new to the congregation basically into one service to give people kind of an orientation to Unitarian Universalism and CVUUS and prepare the ground for them to ask any other questions they might have in deciding whether to become a member, to remain a friend, how to participate. So normally it's only gone on for people who identify themselves as newcomers, and that's great. They get to meet each other and share stories. But given where we are in the life of the congregation and the transitions coming up, I wanted to experiment with doing it this way and see if it helps everybody who's already here become kind of a born-again UU as we move ahead into the next phase of the congregation's life. So for our opening hymn, we're going to have the first song in the hymnal, which was written exactly 100 years ago as a poem by Louis Untermeyer, and it expresses the spirit with which we do everything when we enter this sanctuary. So I invite you to stand in body or just in spirit and sing May Nothing Evil, as it's called in the hymnal, because that's the first words, but we often think of it as Prayer for This House, which is the name of the poem.
Now please join me in reading the chalice lighting words in your order of service or on the screen. Flame, friend of our most ancient ancestors, we kindle you now in this time. Yet in truth you burn always, in the unique worth of each person, in the imagination, in the turning of the heart to sorrow or joy, in the call to hope and in the call to justice. Burn right before us, burn bright within us. And now, Dr. Clemens.
Please, my pitch. Wakey, wakey. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Oh, we are, Lord, climbing Jacob's ladder. I'm a soldier of the cross. Now every round goes higher and higher. Every round goes higher and higher. Oh, every round, Lord, goes high. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm a soldier of the cross. Now, if I stumble, well, will you help me? If I stumble, will you help me, Lord? Oh, if I stumble, will help me? I'm a soldier of the cross. Amen.
Thank you so much, Francois. And I asked Francois to sing this morning because there's a special pathway to connection coming up. This coming Saturday, Francois is going to be offering a concert of spirituals here. And he asked us a while ago, is there a way around his 78th birthday we could give him an opportunity to do his sort of last full concert performance, because he's getting to the age where he just can't meet his incredible standards for a full performance. And that's what's happening here in this room next Saturday. We've been with Francois for a large part of his journey through the latter stages of his amazing life. And we're going to be with him through this. And we want you to be here, and we want you to invite friends, offer them a ride if necessary. This is going to be a very special event, and this room should be packed. So, normally at this stage of the worship service, we have a time for all ages, and we have children with us, and we do something specially pointed towards them. Aaron, we didn't have the kids in at the beginning of the service, so, okay. Instead, Martha and I are going to treat you to a little bit about what religious exploration is all about at CVUUS, and this would all be part of the new UU classes, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way. So, but I often start off the new UU classes with two stories, which I use to illustrate the difference between religious exploration here as we understand it, and religious education the way it occurs in a lot of other institutions. So, the first story involves a Christian pastor who decides to go into the religious education class, and he wants to use squirrels to make a point. I've taken this story from Anne Lamott. You have a job in this story. You are all this Sunday school class, and your job is to not raise your hand when he invites you to, and to be totally perplexed and a little worried about where this is going. Think you can do that? That's your job. So one Sunday, the pastor goes in to try and teach this object lesson to the children. He says, I'm going to describe something, and I want you to raise your hand when you know what it is. At this stage, they're nodding eagerly. He goes, this thing lives in trees, and it eats nuts. He says, oh, I see no hands are going up. All right, it's gray. It has a long, bushy tail. The children look at each other nervously, but still no hands are raised. It jumps from branch to branch. It chatters and flips its tail when it's excited. Finally, one child tentatively raised her hand, and the pastor quickly called on her, Martha.
Well, I know the answer is supposed to be Jesus. but it sure sounds like a squirrel.
The second story I share with the new UUs goes like this. An elementary school teacher was giving a drawing class to a group of 6-year-old children. And at the back of the classroom sat a little girl named Martha who normally didn't pay much attention in school. In the drawing class, though, she did. For more than 20 minutes, the girl sat with her arms curled around her paper, totally absorbed in what she was doing. The teacher found this fascinating. Finally, the teacher went over. And asked the girl what she was drawing.
I'm drawing a picture of God.
The teacher was surprised, but nobody knows what God looks like.
Well, they will in a minute.
I tell this first story to say that the religious exploration isn't just the modern name for what we call religious education. We're very careful about anything we present to our children as an answer. Exploration starts with encouragement to report what something seems like to you, not with an expectation drilled into you that everything is grounded in one story about a particular God. We do start young with behavioral goals grounded in our principles, most of which are unaltered from those described by the Unitarian Universalist minister Robert Fulghum in 1986, the year CVUUS was founded in the Birninghausen's living room. In his book, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. So a lot of you are familiar with this in the song form, if not the book. There are things like share everything, play fair, don't hit people, Put things back where you found them. Clean up your mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Lots of Bible rules are about hygiene. Flush when you go to the bathroom. And when you go out in the world, watch for traffic, hold hands, look before you cross the street. Remember the seed in the little paper cup? First the roots go down and then the plants grow up. Now, as the kids get a little older, we complicate these things with where those little rules aren't true, but right from the beginning, we're honest with them. So, as Fulcum writes in his book, it's not in the song, the lesson about the plant growing up ends with the fact that the plant will eventually die, like all living things. So from the very beginning, we talk where it's appropriate with kids about big questions like death. We talk with where it's appropriate for kids, in our view, about things like sexuality. Our whole lives, sexuality courses are best known for the deep dive they start doing into sexuality in the 4th and 5th grade classes and then in the 7th and 8th grade classes. But there is a kindergarten unit, kindergarten 1st grade, that we've taught here that starts with teaching kids that their bodies are sacred and it's not right for anybody to do anything to them that doesn't feel good. So that doesn't happen in a lot of other religious institutions, and it's one of the ways I try to explain to Unitarian Universalists. They might find this one to be a little different. I want to just sum up by saying two things. As the kids grow older, we bring them more and more into the life of the congregation, and it culminates in a coming-of-age program when they're 12 or 13, when they're actually asked to share with the congregation in a service that they run what they think about God or anything else that's sacred to them in their life. And from that point on, they're eligible to, that's kind of a gateway to joining the congregation if someone wants to join it as a teen, which isn't usually the case. They're teenagers, but the option is there. The spirit of all this was summed up in a song created for a Unitarian Universalist day camp in California for 6 to 12-year-olds by Lila Ibrahim and Reverend Sherry Prudhomme. And these are the lyrics to that song. It's a blessing we were born. It matters what we do. What we know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do, and we don't have to do it alone. And with that, in our normal service, we would sing the children out to their religious exploration classes. Today, it's where we get to our offering. Now, our offering donee is chosen by a congregant team called the donations team, and our policy is to pick one donee for a whole month. But in a month where there's a 5th Sunday, we choose a different donee just for that Sunday so that it's equalized around the year for the donees. Often, we use that Sunday to respond to something that's a crucial thing in the news, like an earthquake or whatever. This Sunday, we're sharing our offering with the National Association for Mental Illness Vermont chapter. Now, this request came to me from Keith Rickerby, who is our sexton. I don't know how many of you know Keith, but Keith has struggled throughout his adult life with some mood disorders and some conditions that sometimes interrupt his ability to sense the rest of the world the way everybody else does. And he's familiar with NAMI Vermont as a client, and because they do a lot of peer-to-peer work, also with their programs to help him help other people. He also is very appreciative of the other mental health organizations in Vermont. For instance, the counseling service of Addison County works with him and provides him with a supervisor that allows him to do his job here as the sexton. NAMI held its major fundraiser yesterday, a walkathon in Burlington, and we view the collection today as amplifying whatever they managed to raise there. So I invite you to be as generous as you're able. Please stand to receive the offering with the words on the screen. So it's a busy day for milestones and passages. I think there are always busy days for milestones and passages, but this time a lot of people gave them to me to share. All right. I'm going to start with some that came in during the week. Richard Hopkins asked me to ask us to remember Harry Belafonte, who died this week. Richard gave me a really wonderful description of his lifetime, but to boil it down, he was a very important singer and interpreter into this country of the calypso tradition, which is a form of music that sounds very upbeat, but often includes some very, very strong social criticism in Trinidad and Tobago, where it originates. In bringing this tradition to all kinds of songs, he also was a relentless campaigner for civil rights, sometimes risking his popularity to take unpopular positions. On the other hand, and Richard didn't say this, but my late mother-in-law would want me to say this, when he got a hold of a love song, she would always get a big smile and call him the toe curler. So, a great performer who will be missed for the work he did as well as the art he brought us. I got a call this week from Anna Bright. The Brights were a long-time member of the congregation. They had a very hard time here at different times in Middlebury because of health problems in the family and employment problems. They ended up moving to North Carolina, and Anna called in response to an email I sent several months ago to say they're all thriving. Anders is working in Burlington and preparing to go to New York to try his hand at acting, having gotten some roles in the Burlington area where he actually got paid. Tor is finishing college in Maine and getting very involved in music and choirs. Elizabeth is thriving at Boston University, and Kira, the youngest child, has had increasing health problems, but is otherwise doing well. And Anna just retired at age 65, and Michael, who's a little younger, who has a lot of health problems, has a good job working with people who have ADD, which he's really well suited for. So it's great to know that this family, that a lot of us helped, and for which Anna expressed thanks again, moved and is thriving in its new location and still feels connected to us. Julia Chant emailed me to say she probably couldn't be here today. I'm just scanning the room. Her mother fell off a horse, her horse, on Wednesday, broke 4 ribs in her clavicle and was discharged from the hospital. And Clara has been down, Julia and the daughter Clara were down helping her mother in Meriden. Julia said her mother was already having other severe leg pain that prevented her sleeping, so positioning has been a bit of a challenge. And Julia asked us to send whatever prayer and positive energy we can that way to help her mother through this time. And we actually had an email exchange where I said, oh, and it must be really hard for her worrying about her horse and whether she could continue horseback riding. Because people, as we reach the end of our lives and end up having to give things we love, that's sometimes really, really hard. And they're trying to make it so that she can keep the horse. But Julia said, yes, that's what she's most worried about through all the pain, is keeping the horse. And all of us, I think, can relate to it, because all of us have seen that happening in ourselves or parents with different things. I'd ask for your warm thoughts and prayers for my daughter, Maddie. She leaves Tuesday for 2 months in Poland, working on the USAID response to Ukraine. So she won't be far from a war region, and she'll be doing good work, but it's going to be long work. Liam sent me this note, and I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'm just going to go through reading, and forgive me if I get something wrong, Liam. The past October, I officially withdrew my membership from the Reformed Church and brought to closure by dabbling with both UU and my Christian affiliations. Now I'm fully UU and proud to be. When our LGBTQ pride flag was recently stolen and temporarily replaced by a much larger flag, I realized that I was proud of how this community affirms human diversity. We flew the jumbo pride flag without hesitation and later replaced it with a more practical expression of welcome. I'm so proud of you. Bless you all. Well, Liam, thank you for that. For those of you who don't know, when Mike first brought Liam into our sanctuary, first or second time, it was a summer, and we didn't have an accompanist. And Liam said, all right, well, I can do that. And he just sat down at the piano and accompanied all the hymns. And Margie Young, who was sitting next to me, said, now we're all in love with him. and that's only gotten stronger. And the last thing I have to share is a bit of, it's hard news. It's about Jerry Loney, a beloved member of the congregation. Jerry is in the ICU at UVM with a very serious case of pneumonia that may have resulted from COVID. It's not clear whether he'll survive. And the family has discussed how far to go with treatment. Poppy and her mother Bobby and her brother Tor are with him, and Poppy asks that everyone hold the entire family in your hearts. It's clear to me from talking to Bobby and Poppy that they and Jerry don't want any visitors outside of the family for now. If you feel the need to be in touch, short texts are currently better than phone calls. Short texts and long prayers. And for this beloved family, and for Jerry, who's contributed so much for so many years to CVUUS. With that, I'm going to invite you into a short period of silence to get in touch with anything else that's on your heart. And then we're going to sing a hymn called As Tranquil Streams. And we're singing it because it's part of the new UU class, because it is the very first hymn that was sung when the Unitarians and the Universalists first merged in 1961, after over a century of talking about it. And in the class I go into why it took so long, but just think about these people who've been debating forever about whether to merge, and they finally do it after some long, very hard discussions about what's being given up in each tradition, and this is the first hymn that they chose to sing. So after our silence, we'll do that. There's a Unitarian minister who writes a column called From the Far Fringe, where she reviews every single song in our hymnals. And in 2017, this is what she wrote about that one. Today we sing it about the individuals who make up the church, but it is much bigger than that. It is about your congregation and mine, your cluster and mine, your region and mine, all of us together, agreeing that we are stronger together and that the future awaits our liberating ministry. A goodness knows the present needs it too. So part of the New UU course is what I call a 2,000-year dash through history in an hour and a half. And we do this because even though a lot of people aren't interested in history, we believe that a deep understanding of history is helpful if you want to understand how the world came to be what it is today. And particularly, it's helpful in understanding something about who we are, because when it comes to influence, Unitarians who lived 200 years ago have a much bigger impact on the shape of our world today than any modern Unitarians I know of, with the possible exception of Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. When I was growing up, our history was taught largely as the history of white men who were key figures in the struggles to make America more liberal, just, and compassionate. And it was always a little bit dishonest, even when it was truthful about how we often treat as heroes today those who were working against the mainstream Unitarianism or Universalism of their times, not for it. For instance, we learn about the Reverend Theodore Parker hiding as fugitive formerly enslaved people in his home or his congregation, which at that time was very radical, and keeping a pistol on hand that he would use if any bounty hunters tried to take these people from his care. But we weren't told that he regarded black people as inferior to whites in almost every way. In other words, he was protecting them mostly as an adult protects children in his mind. One historian described him as a very complicated person, towed to the left by his skeptical head and to the right by his sincere heart. Parker led a raid, an armed raid on a courthouse in Boston trying to free a black man who had been captured by bounty hunters. It was kind of a confusing occasion. He actually asked people to gather again tomorrow morning after he'd gotten them all riled up. And they sort of ignored him and raided the courthouse right then, and someone was shot. It says something about the Unitarians of the day that while Parker and Thomas Higginson, another minister, were out there doing this, the sheriff who was holding this man was also a Unitarian. And the President of the United States, who sent troops to prevent the interruption of this man being sent back to the South, was Franklin Pierce, also a Unitarian. So both sides of the issue, and that wasn't always taught to me when I was young. But I usually end up thinking it's just too daunting to do much of the history. And so I pick out people who are interesting, and I just tell their stories to the class. And we're going to do a little bit of that here in a different way. And I called it, I called it UU History in a Nutshell to start with, but I realized this was so ridiculous to think that we were doing it that I changed it to Nutty Shell. And this is what we're going to do, which isn't exactly how it happens in the class. So, Martha, take it away. Pick up the first envelope. What does it say?
It says martyrs.
And who are the nominees?
Jesus of Nazareth, Michael Servetus, Francis David, James Reeb.
Oh, and Thomas Starr King, is he in there? I meant to have him in there.
Thomas Starr King is
Yes.
on there now.
Yes, he's in there now. 5 potential martyrs. And some of you may say, Jesus of Nazareth, a Unitarian? But hey, he only believed in one God. It's the people who came after him who said God was 3. And so he was Unitarian with a small u, as are all Jews and Muslims. But the winner is James Reeb, the minister.
You didn't let me open the envelope.
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't rehearse this thoroughly. Open the envelope. Who's the winner, Martha?
Well,
You can tell how often I watch the Academy Awards.
also, he really sealed these up. He probably used glue and tape both. What do you know? James Reeb.
So how can I say that James Reeb, the minister who was clubbed to death at Selma, answering the call for ministers to come march at Selma, was a more important martyr to us than these other people? And believe me, all of these martyr stories are amazing. In addition to being crucified, there's burned at the stake with green wood to make it last longer. Getting sick and rotting away in jail, that's Francis David. Thomas Starr King preached himself to death, traveling up and down California, trying to keep California in the Union before the Civil War, which financed the Civil War. But James Reeb is my choice out of these 5 because James Reeb is the one who's most recent and is with us still in our memories. People in our movement knew James Reeb. It's only recently that the last person who was with James Reeb when he got clubbed to death died. And James Reeb was there fighting about something that we have come to recognize in recent years as absolutely central to our future, which is dismantling racism and other oppressions. And so I think of all the martyrs in Unitarian history, Reeb is one that we need to keep in mind.
But Barnaby, aren't you showing your white male privilege with this list of nominees? How honest is any type of American history without women, without African Americans, and genderqueer folks, just to name a few historically marginalized groups? Come on.
Good question, Martha. It occurred to me while I was preparing this history homily, too. I get it, and we will get to it as we go along here. Who are the nominees for writers and artists?
Well, let's see. I hope you got them all this time. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Erasmus Darwin, Louisa May Alcott, Margaret Fuller, Pete Seeger.
All of these people have a connection to Unitarian Universalism. Some of it's pretty tenuous, like Pete Seeger, who joined community church in order to have access to it to play with some friends and to practice. But his mother was a lifelong Unitarian and very active, and he grew up familiar with the church, and I hope it influenced his values. But the winner, I'm going to say, is...
The winner is... He used sticky Post-its in here, and they're all sticking to each other. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
So, Emerson isn't the most recent on that list, but Emerson had more influence over America's concept of itself in the 19th century and into the 20th century than any of these other people, and was friends with everyone on this list except Pete Seeger. And he was a contemporary of Erasmus Darwin and knew him. Erasmus Darwin was Charles Darwin's grandfather, a Unitarian, and had a lot to do with what Darwin thought, although Darwin did not identify with the church. His wife did. So Emerson had an amazing life. And this book about sums it up. You can see how far I'm going to get with it. Emerson, The Mind on Fire. I highly recommend it to anybody who has some reading time. But Emerson was one of these people who wanted fame and became famous without ever seeming to want fame. He had a gift for just being himself. And he was a lot weirder than a lot of people realized. His father was a prominent Unitarian minister. He became a Unitarian minister and then quit because he could not do communion. He just simply didn't believe it, and his congregation wanted it, and so he quit. But about that time, his young wife died of tuberculosis. They'd been married for less than 2 years, or around 2 years, and he was so torn up about it that a year later, on the anniversary of her death, he dug up her grave just to see that she was really dead. So, you know, this is not normal behavior, even 200 years ago. He then went off to Europe and to recover and to read and write and meet all the famous people of Europe, and came back to become the writer and influencer that he is today. I mean, he was the one who got Thoreau out to Walden on land that he owned, and he became the center of the Transcendentalist movement. So if you want to know where Unitarianism went, it's not where it was when he was writing, but where it went, you have to start with reading Emerson. But I heartily recommend that you read more about Louisa May Alcott and Margaret Fuller. Margaret Fuller, judged by many to be the most influential woman writer of the 19th century, an early feminist, and a handful for everyone who knew her when they created a farm, a utopian community, a bunch of Unitarians. Nathaniel Hawthorne went out to work on the farm, and they named the most obstreperous cow they had to deal with Margaret, after Margaret Fuller, because while everyone recognized her genius, everyone also found her intensity amazing to deal with. And she went off to Italy, married a revolutionary, had a child. It's not clear whether it was before they were married or not that she embarked on this adventure. And then, as they were coming back to this country, fleeing the revolution, drowned within sight of Long Island when the ship went down, and she was afraid the baby wouldn't make it to shore and didn't even try to swim. Emerson was so upset that he sent Thoreau down to spend 2 weeks looking for any remnant of her and her works. Lots more you could say about all of these people. What do you have next, Martha?
We have social activists.
The nominees are?
Oh my goodness, there must be 100 names on here. Barnaby, really?
Well, just take a good squint and pick out one.
Okay. Let's see if it's the same one that's in here.
I'm sure it will be. You have amazing powers.
Dorothea Dix.
How many people in the room know about Dorothy Dix? Yeah, some people have been paying attention to a lot of UU talk over the years, or they've been in the healthcare field. This week would be her 221st birthday. She's born in 1802. She was raised in a very troubled family. Her father was an itinerant Methodist minister and abusive. Both parents were alcoholics. When she was 12, depending on which story you read, she either ran away or was shipped to her grandmother in Boston, and shortly thereafter to her aunt in Worcester. But by age 14, she was so brilliant and so self-taught that she was running her own school and having great success with the children she taught. She was searching for who she was theologically. She was very tall, she was very severe, very interested in right and wrong. But she found the religions she had been exposed to as a child too restrictive. Along the way, she met some Unitarians, began attending Unitarian churches, became friends with William Ellery Channing, the foremost minister of his time in Boston, and the occasional governess for his children, even going on vacations with them. And she started writing books. The best known was Conversations on Common Things, published in 1824, often reprinted, was designed to help parents answer their children's questions. It's sort of like Jane Lindholm's But Why radio program, but with many, many more answers, much more compressed, to questions like, why do we call today Monday? Or how is corn ground? And it was written as a long-running dialogue between a patient mother and an ever-curious child. And it was a bestseller, but it's not what she became famous for. Teaching was followed by a lifelong mission to improve the treatment of people with mental illnesses in hospitals, and hospitals in general, interrupted by a stint running the Army's nursing corps in the Civil War. And it all began in March of 1841 when John Nichols, a Unitarian Harvard Divinity School student, was assigned to teach a Sunday school class for 20 women incarcerated in the East Cambridge jail, and immediately decided that a woman would probably be better for this job than he would be. He asked his mother for what he should do, and she pointed him to Dorothea Dix. He went to Dix for advice. She decided to teach the class herself, and what she encountered in the jail shocked her and changed her life. The jail was unheated. Those that were incarcerated were not segregated. Hardened criminals, men and women, feeble-minded children, and mentally ill were all occupying the same quarters. The conditions were bad, but the treatment was often even worse. Dix observed that the women were starved, beaten, chained, and sexually abused. She secured a court order to provide heat and to make other improvements, and she never turned back after that from working on conditions around the world. And what she did was so exhausting to her, and she had her own health problems, that she periodically broke down and needed times of a year to a year and a half, sometimes 2 years away from the work simply to recover. But being Dix, she wasn't a good patient. For instance, when she traveled to Europe in 1854 to rest, she soon learned of the great disparity between private hospitals for the wealthy and the miserable public facilities for the insane in Europe. So she set out to investigate and agitate for reform. And when she investigated, she didn't just talk to people, she would go and be in the prisons and in the hospitals and see firsthand, and then present overwhelming evidence that it was hard for people in power to ignore. From 1854 to 1856, she traveled in 14 countries and instigated many changes while she was supposed to be resting. She even managed to get an audience with Pope Pius IX, having looked at the conditions in Rome, and then got him to go look at one of the hospitals, whereupon he did something to improve the conditions in the hospital and compared what he called this Protestant lady, quote unquote, to St. Teresa. She was not easy to deal with. During her stint in the Civil War, most of the other nurses rebelled at her restrictions, and she got kind of sidelined by people who just didn't want her my way or the highway approach in the midst of all that tragedy. But she continued to work throughout her life, and no one had a bigger impact on treatment of mentally ill people in this country than Dorothea Dix. Just one of many, many social reformers.
Barnaby, we're never going to get through these envelopes, so look at them all.
All right, that's one of my main points. Let's just do one more quick one. Pick out important dates.
This says important dates.
The nominees.
And the nominees are 325 AD, 1629, 1819, and 1961. And the winner is Barnaby, you forgot to write something on here.
Oh, no, I didn't, because it's a trick question. The most important date for CVUUS is always today. But those dates are important if you want to know our history. I won't go into it. Part of the class is helpful as a history lesson, but today I think it's especially important because we're living in a world where people are saying you shouldn't teach history, especially history that's uncomfortable. And that's exactly where we've been going as a denomination over the last 20 years, looking about what's uncomfortable in our own history and what's uncomfortable in the world's history. So more important than ever for us to not look at the history as something we can ignore, but we actually have to not only learn it, but we have to defend everybody's right to learn it. We're going to have a quick little musical interlude with one of our most familiar songs, Come, Come, Wherever You Are. Interestingly enough, the version in the hymnal leaves out an important word, a line from Rumi's poem, which is, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. So in the back of your mind, sing it, remembering that's an important line of the song. I invite you to stand. We'll sing it through quickly 2 times. There's a request to sing it twice as fast, and I think it's a good request. And this is a good lead into how we operate. Let's play. Thank you, Jordan. So I'm not going to talk for a long time about who we are and how we operate. Just don't want you to get panicky about where we are in the order of service. But who we are and how we operate is there in the pews. I'm responsible for executing a lot of it. I view a lot of what I do as getting us started, a lot of what I do as looking for where the energy is for what we're supposed to be doing and amplifying it, of advising the board. We operate in a system that's called policy governance, where we have a bunch of rules that the board makes for me about what I can do and what I can't do. And then whatever I decide to do within those rules, the board tends to accept, is supposed to accept, even if they have a better idea of how to do it. They're not going to be nitpicking me as the minister and lead minister. And by the same token, I delegate a lot to congregants, and we don't nitpick you once the delegation has happened. So the Rhubarb Festival, which is going to be happening in June 3rd, and you can sign up downstairs for whatever you want to do with that, that's run by the congregants. And the congregants, as this develops, come to me and say, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that. And I can't ever remember a time when I said no to any of the requests. It's just a matter of preventing conflicts. So it's your congregation, and that's particularly apparent now as I'm getting ready to retire, and as Ronnie is moving on later this summer, and we're going to have to decide what to do with the music. And one of the biggest things that points to your congregation is we're not one of those rich old New England congregations with a huge endowment that funds everything we want to do with what the money's spinning off of the endowment. I know churches where the entire minister's salary is paid for out of endowment. We're a pay-as-you-go congregation because we were only founded in 1986 and we haven't built up an endowment. And that can sometimes lead to crunches. So rather than tell you a lot about how we operate right now, I'm going to be open to any questions you have. But I'm going to invite John Barstow to come up and give you a very short orientation as to where we are now in one of the most important aspects of our operating, which is preparing a budget for the next year, because our bylaws require that that budget has to be balanced. And we will be voting on something at the annual meeting, June 4th. What that's going to be is being determined now.
Great. You see, we all delegate. So this is a quick State of the UU Union as far as the canvas goes. I have a cheat sheet because numbers are my nemesis. But there's great news and there's pretty good news. One of the great things is that we have over 90% participation of all of you, and that's really important. And people do what they can do. It doesn't always reach where we think we need to be, but people participate, and that's how this place works. That's how we roll, as I think Anne said at one point. From 104 pledge units, that term can be a family or a person, our total to date is 286,682. That includes over $15,000 in one-time gifts. I also have to tell you that number, 286,682, is about $50,000 short of our goal to have a budget that will do what we all feel and we want to do. So I think it's a huge time to be thanking each other for participation. You'll hear more about efforts. In fact, there's some meetings taking place about more effort behind some additional one-time gifts. But I want us to feel good about where we've gotten to, and also determined to arrive at the place that gives us the budget we feel we deserve in order to move into the future with strength and conviction. Thank you.
So this is what happens. The minister doesn't get out and beat the bushes for the money in this congregation. The congregation beats the bushes for the money in the congregation because you know it's your congregation. But the minister has to know what's going on. So I'll just elaborate a little bit. When John's talking about doing what we need to do, this is the bare bones doing what we need to do. It isn't putting as much in our building reserve as we think is prudent. It isn't paying our fair share to the UUA, which we did right up until 2 years ago, every year of our existence. And part of that is because of inflation, and part of it is because we got moved into a territory that includes Burlington, and the UUA raised its estimate of what's fair for us to be paying our staff, and our staff is 2/3 of our budget. So the consequences of falling way short of your goal will be cuts in either staff hours or staff pay instead of raises that have been determined to be fair. So this is something about deciding who you want to be as a congregation going forward. We've been very fortunate in one respect having me as a minister, because I'm at a stage of my life where I have a pension in addition to my salary. To attract the next minister you want, you may need to pay something closer to what the UUA says is a fair rate. They may have kids, they may not have a pension or Social Security coming in. And you don't want to be stuck with only getting someone old. All someone old tells you is that they're good at surviving. It doesn't tell you that they're going to be a good minister. So it's a defining time for us financially. It isn't the first time we've had a defining time financially. And there are a bunch of different options because of the prudence of all the founders and people who've been in this congregation over the years. We have a reserve that some churches don't have. We're eating into it at a rate that's not sustainable. So part of this fundraising is to say, how fast are we eating into that reserve? Are we going to maintain a safe margin? But it isn't all about the money. In fact, none of it's about the money. It's about how you are going to be able to gather. Is this space going to stay all yours, or are you going to have to rent so much of it out to someone to keep the space that you can't really use it? That happens to some churches. These are all things that are in your control. I know everybody has hard choices about what to do with their assets. I always say that people who aren't here on Sunday are where they need to be, and people who aren't giving more are giving where they need to give or saving where they need to save. In some cases, they're giving more than they should be giving to us, and when we become aware of that, we actually ask them to reconsider. We don't want anybody going to the poorhouse just to be a member. And one telling thing is the power given to me as a minister to waive any financial requirement for membership in the congregation. So that tells you where our values are. I'm going to invite us to sing as our closing song, Spirit of Life. It's number 123 in the hymnal. It's a relatively modern hymn, and it's one that is sung in almost every Unitarian Universalist congregation I know of. So if there's any single hymn in the hymnal that tells you where Unitarian Universalism has gone over the last 30 years, I think this one is it. thanks for coming today. 15 minutes over is about what a lot of the classes run. So this is fitting for the new UU classes. Those of you who have had their interest piqued about membership, I'm happy to answer lots more questions. Those of you who've had your interest piqued about some of the history, I have a sampling of the books from our amazing library for you to look at, and I can talk to you some more if you want to dig deeper. I hope everybody will get out and pull at least a couple of weeds. The weeds have cooperated in coming up so that we have something to do on Blue Jean Sunday, and the weather has cooperated by not raining. So no one's being asked to put in 5 hours washing windows and weeding, but if everybody does a little symbolically, and those of us who are really into it do a little more, our space will look a lot better. And most importantly, go for this week full of the love, the variations on love you heard about in different parts of the service, knowing that you're part of a tradition that, as we sang, reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and help make that dawning future a bright one.